great.
Oh, okay. Hello, welcome to the Zoning Design Review Board meeting tonight, September 8th. I will call the meeting to order. Sandra, you want to do roll call?
Member Cook.
Here.
Member Allen.
Here.
Member Tigret.
Here.
Member Dorham.
Here.
Member Laz.
Here.
All present.
All righty. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
In a second?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Sorry, not of August 11th, of September 8th.
Approval of minutes from the last meeting, so that would be us three. Oh, no, you guys were here for part of it. I need a motion to approve the minutes unless anybody has any revisions or changes to the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
A second? All up in favor? Minutes are approved. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda by anybody that's here tonight? Okay, then we will move on. Nobody has a comment. The consent calendar, are there any things for the consent calendar, Sandra?
No
Okay.
items.
Okay, so we can move on to our public hearings.
At this point, I will recuse myself due to a professional relationship with Restoration Hardware.
I didn't get the TV turned on. I'm sorry.
Oh. Okay, no worries.
And did you have to? No? Okay. Okay.
All right. As you know, this item came before you at your meeting in August, and you considered the applicant's request to have a sign that has a Pablo Picasso quote and two RH identification signs to either side, symmetrically balanced on this sign with a black background and in white lettering. And you gave feedback to the applicant that you would consider approving the request, but requested that findings be brought back before you. Those findings are here tonight. In the time between your meeting in August and tonight's date, there was a pre-construction meeting held on site, and staff indicated a concern to the construction crew that we have a sign that has a phone number where residents can call to make issues, ask questions as to the site, and that sign is also included in the packet before you. And so, like I say, it's being brought back before you with the findings that are included in this chapter, and we're asking that you conduct the hearing and make a decision.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of staff? Barbara? No. Karen?
No. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One is the staff report says black in color, and the sign now is kind of a charcoal gray, and I would be more in favor of leaving it as the charcoal gray rather than a deep black. And I don't know what people mean by the color black, so they could just mean the color it is now. The other one is currently sort of the banner that's on there for the construction company is bright red, which I personally am not overly in favor of, and I would like to ask the applicant to consider making it more in keeping with the black and white or the gray and cream of the sign. And then the third thing is I guess they're basically asking us to go from 2 RH logo signs, from that to 2 RH logo signs plus the construction company information, which I don't know whether that has to be like a Tombstone standalone or whether that can be incorporated as typeface only. But I was wondering if other members had any thoughts on that, and if there are going to be 3 actual squares of signage, what we might think about the square footage on that.
Okay, thank you. So
I can go ahead and answer some of
Okay.
those questions.
Yeah.
I understand that the charcoal gray you see out there now is the black that will be the background of the sign. We can make that more clear by making that a condition of approval of the project, that we maintain, that you like that color and you think it's more in keeping with the Yountville aesthetic. Let's see, with regard to the number of signs, yes, they're looking for 3 signs. However, one of them stands out as separate and apart from the others because it's red and it's attached to the wall rather than being painted on it. Perhaps a way for it to be more integrated with the Yountville aesthetic would be to use the same color schemes and to paint it in a more symmetrical manner. Were those all 3 of your questions?
I think that
Okay,
covered
okay.
all of my topics, yes. Oh, the square footage, which I guess is, if they would keep it, what they're looking at in the way of square footage for the actual logo and information, not the quote.
Okay, and so the applicant isn't here tonight, so we can't ask them on that item. But it is possible that we could consider that the RH Yountville is the sign, and the other, I'd have to look to see what that language is below, I'm sorry.
it was going to be the gallery in Napa Valley
Gallery in Napa
with the
Valley.
RH Yountville logo.
So yeah, that would all be considered signage, so we couldn't eliminate any of that from our calculation of total area, that is.
But we could ask them to paint the construction sign information on the wall.
Yes, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay. So the next step, did you have any questions? Okay. Would be to talk to the applicant and discuss these things with the applicant. Now, if the applicant is not here, how do we negotiate, work through these changes? Do we just decide what we recommend?
Yes, you should discuss it. We should also open up to the public to see if anyone
Oh,
would
yeah,
like
there's
to
that.
address this as well. But in the absence of the applicant, you'll want to discuss your concerns amongst yourself. See if you would include any as a project approval for being consistent with the Yountville aesthetic, and make changes by conditions. I would suggest that those be as minor as possible while achieving what you think is in the best interest of the town.
Okay. Does anybody from the public have any comments on this agenda item? Okay, nobody does, so we can move on to a discussion of the members. Barbara, did you have any comments?
No, I guess what they're proposing, that's the RH color. And the red is not an RH color. Why, I wonder why that
No,
red is in there.
That's the Cello Madru
Oh, the
Construction
builder.
Company, the builder.
Yeah.
And it's their logo, so they've
see.
just defaulted to their own logo colors.
Okay. Karen?
So you're saying that you think that what we could, in essence, recommend is that that separate sign become incorporated into that main fence sign? So then they
Yes.
don't have 2 signs because they're entitled to 1 construction sign, is that what?
They're
Or
entitled one.
aesthetically?
Yeah. And it's the town that encouraged them to put up the construction sign with the telephone number identification.
Right, so people
So that
could get
basically
to it
comes
to
from
Brigham
staff recommendation rather than this applicant. The applicant is RH, and so that's a little bit separate and apart from this application before
Okay.
you.
I mean, what they're asking for far exceeds what we've agreed to in town in any other location. They're asking for 39 square feet of sign and 3 signs instead of 1.
Correct.
If they were here, I would tell them that I felt that part of the reason they wanted to be in Yountville is because of the design and aesthetic that we've created here, and extending their requests that far don't fall in those parameters, in my opinion. So I guess we'll have to look at if anybody else, what they have to say.
Is there some compromise that we could maybe talk about that is somewhere between the 24 feet that we consider as typical 24 square feet and the 39 that they want? Could we say something like you can have either two tombstones or 3, and here's your total square footage? Because the sign is 90 feet long and 8 feet tall, so you have a lot of area to work with. Just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, we're not counting the quote because that was deemed to be separate. We're just talking about the one that identifies who it is, the property owners. Well, can we? I mean, so we can come up with a recommendation. I'm sorry to have to be asking these instead of just doing it. We can come up with our suggestions and approve it with our suggestions, with our choices.
Well, they would become conditions of approval
Yeah, there are no conditions of approval with this. Why?
because it is accepted as presented, so we don't have conditions before you.
So we have to write our own conditions. Okay. Okay.
So may I ask another question?
Yeah.
So if we give direction and we say we would be comfortable approving X, Y, and Z, but, and I know this couldn't be part of a motion, but could we say, applicant, since you weren't here, we made the best decision we could, but if you want to come back, we could call a special meeting and work it through with you? Could we handle it that
Yes.
way?
We could approve it with conditions, perhaps subject to applicant's approval, and if they don't accept that, we could come back before you.
Do you think that's a better process instead of tabling this until they are here to talk with?
I think we should move forward with it tonight and give them the option of accepting your decision or coming back.
Okay. Okay. Did you want to talk about findings?
There were proposed findings, and once we decide, I think, what we're going to do, I would like to have some discussion or input and probably questions about the findings. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I don't see any reason to grant them more than the 24 feet that is the ordinance. And so that my recommendation would be, I would write a condition of approval that they stick to the 24 feet. I don't know how to do the 3 signs to 1 sign. I mean, it really should be 1 sign, 24 feet. That's what everybody's held to. I don't understand why that is such a problem. How do other people feel?
I can, in this case, see a mitigating circumstance in that, as I read the statute, it's sort of an and/or. You can have the construction and/or the owner. And in this case, it was staff who asked to have the construction information, which I think is easier on staff to have some sorts of questions go directly to the contractor. So, and it would be up to the applicant, but if they wanted to put the RH on one end and the construction on the other and still have a balance in the 24 square feet, we could do that.
Okay. So you're suggesting 2 signs and 24 square feet?
I would leave it open for them if that's allowable, but I can see why in this limited circumstance they might want 2 different signs.
Well, I think we have to have a decision and write it as a condition of approval, and then they have to decide if they want to follow the conditions of approval. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I kind of agree with what you say. It less clutter and not so in your face. It's a small town. That's how most of the things gone down that way in this town. We're a very low key, sort of laid back approach to a lot of things. I think the huge sign is a lot more in your face than what we like to see in this town. So I tend to agree with Kim. So We'll see how most of the members feel.
Okay. Karen?
With what you were saying, I think maybe if the sign's already up, right? I mean, it's there. It's been there. They're talking about adding extra.
They're going to
sign-
change
forget
it
the sign
a
that's-
bit. I think right
Oh, the
now
two,
there's
the
one
side by
logo
sides,
in the
right?
middle.
Another's,
Yeah.
yeah. So if they, I think the whole 1 versus 2 versus 3 signs, I mean, I think it's more of an actual, if there are 2 logos on one sign, I see that as one sign. That's just how I meant what's on that sign. It's one physical standing sign. The extra construction, and that's to help people figure out how to get to the construction site, is also relevant. It's important, and the town requested that. If there's a way to incorporate it all into one sign, I see that as one sign. Can't
So-
they put the cello and the something on that sign?
Would you?
Can't it be incorporated into that sign or no?
That's kind
I
of
think
what
it
we're
can be.
Yeah,
suggesting.
so
Yeah, Carrie's
should
suggestion
just
that they put
incorporate it
RH
into
logo on one side and the construction
Or they get
sign
rid
on
of
the
the other sign. I mean, it's like,
Would you
you
limit?
get a sign, pick a sign. You want your sign to have your name on it, and you want people to have a call of attention to the construction, merge it together, and then you're representing both interests, right?
Would you limit them to the square footage in the ordinance?
Of the 24 feet, and currently it's 39.
Yeah.
That's because of the size of the logo in itself. Is that what we're talking about?
Well,
We
they've,
have 2 12.5 square foot
Right.
RH signs plus a 15 square foot Cello Madru sign.
I don't know about that part. Ask Carrie. Carrie?
I think we've, so 3 of us have kind of agreed that we would offer them the option to have 2 signs, one at each end of the quote.
Right.
They can put what they want there.
Right.
One of them has to include construction information, but they have to remain within the 24 square foot, but they can have 2. Okay,
Right.
so now we need to put all the findings together and then make a motion.
Correct.
Okay.
And we've presented draft findings to you in the staff report.
Right.
So do you want to take a motion on the actual parameters of the approval and then talk about the findings, or do you want to do it all together?
Well, we have to have the findings will be a basis of your approval, so you'll have to, your motion will be to approve the project based on the findings and subject to any modifications, and subject to the following conditions of approval. And I think what I heard is that logo signage not exceed 24 square feet, that it split be allocated in 2 different signs, one for RH and one for Cello Madru. And that the Cello Madru sign shall be painted on the barricade in similar colors,
Yeah,
in light colors.
yeah.
No preference.
So do you feel we need to make some
So
changes to the findings
yes,
to be able to?
I have some I'd like to present, and I apologize, they're pretty lengthy, but I think this is an exceptional circumstance that does bear some discussion. So I think it might be easier, rather than saying what I've changed, to read what I propose as the new findings, if that's all right.
Okay.
So the first element of the Chapter 17.92.100 is we have to make a finding that there are exceptional circumstances applicable to the property, building, or sign, which do not apply generally to other property, etc. And so my proposed finding is the type of construction sign proposed by the applicant is unique as it includes a decorative element. Applicant has established the quoted language as its national theme during the construction phase of its projects. The logo of the owner and the contact information for the contractor are included in the sign as contemplated by Section 17.92.020. Due to the length of the sign, a total of 24 square feet of contact and logo information is appropriate, with no single element to be greater than 12 square feet. So that was kind of how I'm going at the exceptional circumstances.
That fits the conditions of approval we're building, so that makes sense.
And number 2, the finding we have to make that owing to the exceptional circumstances we found in number 1, the literal enforcement of the specified provisions would result in practical or unnecessary difficulty not created by or attributable to the applicable owner of the property. And my proposed finding is applicable town ordinances do not address the use of decorative elements on construction signs and thus must be handled on a case-by-case basis through the exception process.
Well, that sounds very good.
So, well, because that is why we're doing this.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's a perfect explanation.
And number 3, we have to make a finding that the granting of this exception will not constitute a grant of special privilege inconsistent with limitations imposed on other properties or buildings in the vicinity. My proposed finding is no special privilege is vested by granting this exception. It is a one-time permissive grant for a temporary sign. Other construction sign exceptions may be considered upon applicants' requests.
What she said.
Got some more.
And then, but wait, there's more. It's like the Ginsu findings. So number 4, we have to make a finding that the granting of this exception will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or to the property or similar improvements in the vicinity. And my proposed finding is one of the reasons for the town's sign ordinance is to limit visual clutter, and the design presented will present the construction information that town staff will present the construction information in a clean, appealing manner. Town planning staff requested the addition of contractor information to enhance public participation in the construction process.
Excellent.
And number 5, I left as it was. It's the granting of this exception will not be inconsistent with the general purpose or intent of this chapter. And just to review it, the proposed finding is the purpose of the requirement restrictions is to provide a more tasteful appearance of a construction site during the building process, which is often an unsightly, albeit temporary condition. The applicant is proposing a solid wood fencing with vinyl lettering, which is a desired and attractive alternative to temporary chain link fencing with loose green screening material tied to the chain link. And I guess I would ask if the town's attorney needs to review those findings, or if we should make that should we make our approval conditional on his or her review of those?
That's tough, and I'm not sure what to say to that one. Of course, that will delay the approval of the project tonight. And I think his recommendation is to keep the project on track. So I know that should bear on your decision.
So can we approve those findings as she's written them without the approval of the attorney?
Yes. I think that's what she meant.
Yes,
Okay.
but it may be risky.
But I think she did a perfect job of explaining how we've gotten to the decision.
I do too.
We sort of built it backwards, but that's exactly where we ended up.
Yeah, I think they were very well written and as proposed, so, and I think they do a great job of explaining why this project is different from other projects.
And case by case and putting that in there makes sense.
And I think the other condition of approval that we talked about but haven't included is that our approval is subject to the approval of the applicant.
Correct.
And they can come back.
Correct.
Right, so if they don't accept it, they can re-submit.
Okay. So now somebody has to make a motion. Can we, I don't have to repeat all that.
No.
And I will type it out and send it to you if it's approved.
Nice, thank you.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion? Want to give it a shot?
I'd like to make a motion to accept this proposal before us with the findings that you've mentioned in the 5 different findings for the condition of approval.
Along with the condition of approval that we limit the applicant to 24 square
24
feet
square feet in total.
divided between two signs, one of which includes the contractor's contact information. Is that okay? If we wrote that together?
Similar colors and applicant
Oh.
counter approval.
Okay.
And how about the charcoal rather than black background?
The existing color.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even though we all wrote it together, can we vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Would somebody like to second the motion?
I second it. Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Good job, team.
Go get Nicole.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, on to item number 15-451.
Right. Good evening. The item you have before you is design review for a small 100 square foot backyard shed, and in this case, it would be used as a secondary or accessory use to the main dwelling and as an office. The office will contain typical office furniture such as a desk, bookshelf, and reading chair with table, and it is to be used in association with a home office, but the applicant indicates that it will be entirely an office use, that there are no visitors or others that come to the structure, and the intent is really to use it during the daytime only, although it will have an electrical feed that will allow the use of lights. So the applicant is proposing the shed for the southwest corner of the backyard, 5 feet from the side property line and 10 feet from the rear property line. And this is a change from the staff report where it was still undecided whether it would be 8 feet or 10 feet. So it will be fully outside of the 10-foot public utility easement that runs along the rear property line. The design of the structure is more modern, and it will have a full light elevation on the east side facing inward into the yard, and it will contain French doors with fixed windows above and to the side, and with a dark bronze metal trim and a short 2-foot eave, with a 2-foot eave. And the north elevation is the only other one with an opening, and it will have an operable window. No windows are proposed for the west or south elevations, and these elevations will have shortened eaves of just 6 inches. The siding will be horizontal, and that is to match the main residence, and it will also be painted to match the residence, which is in a sage green color. The structure will have a shed roof with a slightly sloping pitch, and the roofing is designed to match the window trim, and it will be a dark bronze metal. It will reach a height of 9 feet 6 inches in height, and when the foundation is put in place, it won't exceed a total height of 10 feet. As I mentioned, it will have an electrical feed, and it will be screened from neighbors and the street with mature shrubbery that the applicant has in the yard and trees. And the applicant has submitted 2 letters of support from adjoining neighbors on Columbard Way, and since the staff report was written, they've submitted the written support of one of the owners. So on one side you have the owner and the tenant giving support, on the other the owner. And so the project does involve the removal of a section of backyard lawn and the associated pop-up sprinkler system, and and that is in the area of the structure that is to be placed. And let me see, so then that is a description of the use. And it really is fully consistent with the town's ordinance as to use and design. Accessory structures are non-habitable buildings that are subordinate and complementary to the primary use, which in this case is a single-family residence. And they can include all sorts of different structures, such as workshops, storage sheds, and typical items you find in the backyard. They've also been interpreted to apply to such things as artist studios or a detached office where it's a passive use that isn't a dwelling for long-term habitation. And so we've reviewed this in terms of an accessory structure and looked at the permissible setbacks which this building meets. If it were a detached second dwelling, which it isn't, it would be required to have greater setbacks. Detached dwellings are also required to have full living facilities that include kitchens and restrooms, and this facility or structure, while it has electrical, doesn't have any of those other elements. And so staff is satisfied it will function as an accessory structure. We have, though, included a condition of approval. It really calls out the importance of it being an accessory use rather than a dwelling, and that's both for the applicant's benefit but for future owners of the property, so it isn't so the code section doesn't become lost. I have noted the town's new drought emergency water conservation requirements that are included in the resolution that I attached to your staff report. And I understand from the town council that this is intended to apply to new projects throughout town with the goal of encouraging the retrofitting of existing landscapes to meet drought-tolerant guidelines. So we are recommending a condition of approval that the applicant address the lawn in the front yard as well. So we are recommending approval, and it is subject to the findings that I put at each of your seats before tonight's meeting and subject to the conditions of approval that are in the staff report. And the applicant is here to present their project as well.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Does anybody have any questions of Sandra? Carrie?
No, I do. Is that part of the stipulation that they will remove the lawn, the front yard, to accommodate this project? Or
Our staff finds that the emergency water conservation guidelines are triggered by this project, and so we do have a condition that existing site landscaping be modified, and it requires drought-tolerant landscaping and drip irrigation. So yes, it does impact the front yard as well.
I don't know how the homeowners association works in that neighborhood, but since there is one, and do they maintain the front yards? And how can we tell?
I understand that they don't maintain the front yards for single-family residences, that
Okay.
the homeowners are responsible. But since it is a design issue, the applicant would be required to work with them, and there have been other properties in the neighborhood that have moved toward a drought-tolerant landscaping.
Okay, good. Mikhail, did you have any questions?
No.
Okay. I have one more question. Under the conditions of approval, number 10 states that the applicant shall obtain a home occupation permit, which I don't understand. I've looked up the application, and if this isn't a dwelling, which it sounds like it's very well described as not being a dwelling, I don't understand this
Well, the
permit.
single-family residence is the dwelling, so the home occupation is to conduct business activity at home, and we have applications that require a designation that it's simply office use with the use of telephone, computer, and things of that nature. And that's considered a minor home occupation. A major home occupation would be something more where you have customers come to your site and you need town council approval. This is just a minor home occupation, and I should modify the condition to note that.
Okay, because
It's,
I went online and all I could find was the major home occupation.
Okay,
So
okay,
there
yeah.
wasn't a minor. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Can we hear from the applicant? And please state your name and address.
Yes, I was going to introduce myself and my wife. Thank you for considering this application. My name is Steve Becker. My wife, Denise Stanford, and we've owned the property on Columbard Way for almost 15 years now. When we were based in San Francisco and subsequently Seattle, we used it on a regular basis for vacations and retreat from particularly the fog of San Francisco and the gray skies of the Northwest. We've been here full-time now for the last 2 years. Denise is a psychologist with offices in Napa. shuttle volunteers at the museum, the Napa Valley Museum here. I'm a physician by training and AIDS and HIV clinician and researcher from San Francisco from the early 1980s. And for the last 7 years, I've worked in global and public health in HIV for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and now will be working as a consultant in HIV global health with the use of this office. Our work, Denise and mine, has always been service-oriented. We continue in that same tradition, and frankly, I need some space to continue this work. We have submitted the proposal. Sandra has summarized that. You've reviewed that. We've had some early discussion with the Homeowners Association, that being last week. Their process is such that we had a conversation. The next step in the process is the consideration by the town, and then we will go back to the HOA for final, hopefully, approval or discussion, certainly. I wanted to say a few things about what the space is and is not, beginning with what it's not. And as Sandra said, it's not a residence, a domicile, a dwelling. No one is going to live there. No one is going to sleep there in a sleeping bag or otherwise. It's not a public office space. My clients, my colleagues are those at the World Health Organization and the governments of Africa and the National Institutes of Health in Washington. And while I am certain that they would enjoy time in the Napa Valley, I go to them, they don't come to me. And so this will not be in any fashion a public or advertised space. It's also not an after-hour space. I'm able to conduct my work, including with time zones +9 to Africa, starting in the morning with usual conventional business hours. What it is a structure manufactured by a company called Studio Shed. It's a modern design. It's a high-quality, sustainable products design. They've been in existence for about 5 years. They've had about 40% of their business is in California, a lot of which is in Northern California, so they're not new to the area. They work with local contractors who are affiliated with them, and so the construction from foundation on up will be done by local Napa builders. It's screened, as Sandra said, from the street and from both east and west, as well as south, by mature landscaping, some of which, in fact, the town installed at the completion of the flood wall project in the back. The building and the concept are supported by the neighbors, as was noted. It will be serviced only by electrical, and in keeping with its purpose, there will be no water, no sewer, and no gas. So just electrical. We will obtain an electrical contractor who will file appropriate permit applications with the town and work with the local contractor for the electrical feed. It will be painted in matching color to the residence. The siding of the structure will match in terms of horizontal planking that of the existing house. And the preparation for the site will result in removal of just under 300 square feet of lawn, and the removal and capping of the sprinkler systems that had previously irrigated the lawn. The rear of the yard already has a drip sprinkler system for the non-lawn areas. That will be updated with the more efficient emitter systems as we have opportunity to expose all of this area. I read the home occupation permit as occupation, i.e. job, not live there. And so I assumed it meant simply that it was a permit to conduct business at the facility. And yes, I will obtain that an appropriate business license. The question of easements has already been resolved, including the maintenance of the 10-foot PUE that was in existence before the floodwall project and continues without abandonment. And we will interface following this conversation, of course, with the HOA to gain their final approval. And so this will obviously be a structure that's only erected, constructed upon approval and meeting the requirements both of the town and the HOA. To just talk briefly about the front yard, we follow all of and have followed all of the recommended water restrictions. The front lawn is watered on Tuesdays and Fridays only. I have recently, my fingers have healed, but have recently removed substantial water using shrubbery and have re-landscaped with drought-resistant plants. Rock have removed the excessive drip irrigation system that supported the water-loving plants and have replaced that with much more modest, in keeping with succulents and cactus and low water use plants. I was not aware that we would have to remove the front lawn, and that would certainly be something that we should discuss. It was not part of our plan to remove the lawn, since we feel we're in full compliance with the regulations both of town and of state in that regard. But I would certainly be curious of your thoughts here. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Okay. Yeah, let me see. Does anybody have any questions? Mikhail, do you have any?
You mentioned that we'll have electricity, obviously. Are there any plans for outdoor lighting on the structure at all?
There will be no outdoor lighting on the structure itself. There is already existing path lights for safety purposes in the backyard, and as long as that provides sufficient light in the pathway back and forth, there will be no other lighting used, but no external sconces or lights on the structure itself.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, Barbara?
I'm good.
No questions?
Yeah, no question.
Carrie?
Did I understand you to say you are going to remove 300 square feet of lawn? Is that in the back, or did I?
So that's in the back to prep the site completely to have access to all sides of the building for maintenance purposes, for instance, for being able to prune the existing shrubbery, keep it off the roof, and remove additional grass. We'll put down a flagstone area in front of the entrance to the structure itself.
But the footprint is 100 square feet.
The footprint of the structure is 100 square feet, absolutely.
Thank you. And it's a very cool-looking building in my perception.
We think so too.
My question to you would be, do you have any objections to any of the proposed conditions of approval that you've been given by the town?
None of the conditions that were in the letter from Sandra. I remain a bit confused about the front lawn.
Well, that is a condition, so that's something that
Well,
you
it
would discuss
says
tonight.
that shall be modified pursuant to the town's water emergency conservation guidelines that require drought-tolerant landscaping and drip irrigation. The applicant shall submit the landscape plan to the planning department for review and approval prior to installation. So specifically, does the town's guidelines require them to remove the front lawn, all the front lawn?
Well, I've called out which section of the resolution we think applies to this project, and it's number 10. It's the last page of the staff report, and it's all new applications for discretionary use permits, which this isn't. It's design review, and applications for new land use projects, and that isn't defined in this ordinance. And new, I suppose, could be determined to apply to vacant parcels, or it certainly does. The question is whether it applies to a shed in a backyard, but it includes and/or including significant redevelopment of an existing building. And in this case, the applicant could have come to us with a request to add a office to the home, and that could be considered significant redevelopment. So we use that to really to analyze the project, and we believe it's consistent with this code section, and I'm mentioning our reasoning to you on that. It is something for you to discuss, and you wouldn't have to include a condition.
If it's helpful, in our discussions with the HOA, we did discuss both the back and the front, and they had no, they were insistent upon the changes in the back as we've discussed, but they had no requirement that we modify anything in the front.
The HOA.
The HOA.
Okay. Okay. So that is sort of up for discussion, how we think the land use part of it applies.
You should look at the different rules. There's the homeowners association, and they can have the private requirements on this property. There are also the state requirements for water conservation, and our local ordinance or resolution was modeled on that. It goes even further than the state regulations. But you can look at the section by the plain meaning of the words and see if you agree with staff or not.
Okay. You had something you want to say, Karen? No?
I mean, I have questions, but not in regards to that.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on that?
No.
Mikhail? No?
So the staff's current reading is they would, in addition to what applicant has already done on the front lawn, they would have to take up all the rest of the grass.
Correct.
What is the approximate square footage on that? Would you know?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I didn't know that before I came.
No,
or I would've-
obviously,
I
yeah.
would have measured. I'm going to guess that that's probably, I was going to say, around 300 square feet.
Mhm.
I can clearly provide that for
Yeah.
you, but in that
About
order.
the same size as the backyard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if nobody has any more questions of the applicant, you can have a seat. Is there any public comment on this application from anybody? Okay, then we'll move on to discussing it among ourselves and all you.
My question was, are we saying that if that addition had been connected to the home, then they would have been, then this ordinance in regards to changing the front lawn would have been required? But that there's gray because it's not attached to the home? Is that what
Kind
is
of.
that where the gray is? Because they're,
Well-
in essence, extending, but it's not attached to the main home?
Well, I would say even an office attached to the building should be analyzed as to whether it was a significant redevelopment of the parcel or not. I think.
Since this is not a dwelling, it's an accessory building, that seems to me like a stretch of that description. And they have done a lot to
Well, they're already
meet
taking out
different,
lawn in the back.
yeah,
being
and
dropped.
changing plants and.
Yeah.
What do you think?
In my mind, it's a large financial burden to place on someone who's already adhering to the back whenever they're replacing the drip irrigation back there and have made strides in the front yard without being asked by town council or ZDRB. I would personally like to find ways to look at this language to make sense. How that we come to that conclusion is up for discussion now.
Okay. Barbara, did you have any?
I am neutral about whether the lawn goes or not, particularly if you have a pet. If you have a dog, you would like to have a lawn. They roll on it, which is a fairly important thing for families. I understand that. You've already taken out the 300. I think that really is a decision between you and the homeowner association and the neighborhood, whether I think Napa is giving money for pulling out your lawn. You may get some financial relief if you ever decide to do that, but I will leave that to the applicant's discretion. It's your home. You want it to look the best and how you use your yard. So I'm going to leave that with you guys.
You guys have any additional comments?
When I look at the proposed condition of approval, it says the site landscaping shall be modified pursuant to the town's water emergency water conservation guidelines. And then we have the guidelines here, which Sandra has pointed out. And I'm kind of thinking that might not be within our say-so as to what, because I would like for the new applicants to go with the conservation guidelines, but I'm kind of with staff in that it's a gray area of what that means in this instance. So that might be something that council might want to look at and say, this is what we mean. So that might be a negotiation offline from the ZDRB. I just throw that out because we have two kind of separate things going here. I mean, we're asking them to abide by the guideline, whatever that is. So I don't know whose job it is to interpret what that is. On the other hand, they have made strides, as other people have mentioned, and that will be an expense.
Well, I think because I had the discussion in the staff report on the fact that staff believes it applies to this project and would apply to the front yard, that removes any of the uncertainty, unless you were to determine that you still think it exists and you were to delete that. So I guess this is sort of a circular argument.
Can we leave in condition number 9, requiring them to modify it according to the conservation guidelines, but somehow clarify it that it doesn't include removing all the front lawn?
Yes.
I mean, it kind of sounds like it's a
Yes.
little vague.
It could apply, the project could be subject to the town's water emergency water conservation guidelines in the area in and around the area of work, so to limit the scope to the backyard if you wanted. Right now, it obviously applies parcel-wide.
Okay. Anybody ready to make a motion?
May I ask staff a couple more questions, please?
Sure.
One is on the proposed review findings. You use the word shed. I personally don't consider it a shed because it has electricity and there's going to be an office and I'm assuming some sort of maybe climate control. Is there just some word we could use other than shed? And on B, we talk about it will not impair or interfere with the use or enjoyment of the property. And we currently have the neighborhood is built out and the backyard shed is typical of backyard improvements in established neighborhoods. Could we add something that says, applicant represents there will be no visitors or extra parking burden? And then I think you mentioned, Sandra, that in the condition of approval, you were going to reference the section of our ordinances that says this is an accessory building, not a dwelling. Did I hear that correctly?
Right. I
Just
brought
for
those
further
with me in case
clarification.
you wanted to make that change. We can refer to it as a chapter 18.44.010 accessory building, so it's clear as to that, and eliminate any reference to the second residential unit unless you want to specifically state that it's not a second residential unit, which
No.
the applicant has agreed to anyway.
And again, to the applicant, I hope this isn't out of order, but this is not something that on you, this is for someone who might purchase your property later so that we just get the permit conditions right on the front end. So those are my comments.
Okay, so those are some adjustments to the findings. And are we going to change the wording on the findings? To accessory building from shed?
I'm
or-
asking for input from the other members. I mean, maybe shed doesn't bother anybody but me, but
I mean, accessory
That's
building
fine.
sounds
Yeah.
a little more descriptive,
Yeah,
a little more correct.
You think, Sandra?
I think accessory structure would be fine.
Yeah, okay. Okay, does anybody want to propose a motion? It's a hard
No,
part.
no, I'm just, last question, I swear.
Sure.
Are we trying to find a way to view these as front yard versus backyard, or are we viewing this as the entire parcel of land?
I think Sandra said that we could separate, we could limit the scope
Backyard.
of the application of the conservation guidelines to the backyard. On condition number 9.
Well, it all
Of
depends on
approval.
how you guys would view that ordinance and those conditions, whether you think it applies or not. So I've explained why staff included the requirement and why we think that section 10 applies, but it is like Member Dorman said, somewhat maybe a gray area.
Yeah, because it's not an addition, it's just an accessory building. So it seems like extending the laws that apply to an addition isn't appropriate in this case.
if we do determine to limit it to the backyard, do we have to make an exception finding of why it would not apply to the entire parcel? I mean, is there any precedent that we're looking at of application to entire parcels?
I think it could be used by other applicants with a similar project to say why they wouldn't have to do the same type of retrofit improvement.
But only if it was defined as an accessory building and not, I mean, it seems like the way it's being put in the same package as an addition is a stretch. So if somebody did an addition, then yes, but if somebody's just doing an accessory building, then it,
Maybe it should be left as a shed then, because as a shed, it's pretty simplistic. When you say accessory building, I think we're making it this grander thing than what it is. And then you do have to be concerned about the front lot, you know. They're already taking out however many 100 square feet of yard to put their shed / accessory building in. For us to have them take another.
except
seems
for I
like a
think
lot.
the term accessory building is used in the code
It is, yes,
more than shed.
correct.
Okay. That's why I was using it, just because it is in the code.
But they're saying if we restrict it to just the backyard being changed and no need for the front, then this could set the precedent. Then we are saying that we have to do case by case again, like the way we did with the sign, or
Well, I think you may want to
There,
include it in
everything's
your
case by
findings.
case.
Let me see where. Maybe under subsection E, it will satisfy the standards and resolutions that the town council may adopt regarding design approval, and we could apply that to other. These standards may be applied to the town as a whole or in one or more land use designations. So you'd want to perhaps include a finding based on the town's water emergency, water conservation guidelines and how make a connection between a backyard accessory structure and the limits of the retrofit you'd like the applicant to make.
And could we be so specific as to say, because of this circumstance, they have already done drought tolerant in the front yard, and because this is an
Yeah.
accessory building
Definitely.
of small dimension, we find that it's applicable only
to
sort of lay out
Yeah.
why we would find an
You'd want to
exception.
approach it with as many of the facts as you have and make it as specific and detailed as possible for this applicant. So I'd look to you for the wording of that.
You do it so well.
So the
Just do what you just
modification
said.
in the front yard has already happened as far as the shrubs and planting, other than the lawn.
Yes,
Okay, okay. So
just by choice.
right,
Sounds
Right.
So we could include the whole front yard and backyard without taking out the lawn, because they already done the modification.
Well, except, let me go back to the language of that
The language of that one.
resolution. It talks about, it shall be required to install drip irrigation and drought tolerant landscapes. Again, the way that's been interpreted is to apply in a retrofit situation where there is a a water-thirsty plant and non-drip irrigation. So I guess it's like all or nothing is how I understand this number 10 to apply.
Carrie's drafting that up.
Well, do I have to specify it exactly, or can we kind of get the gist of it and then I need to specify it exactly?
No, we can work on it as long as you get the basic idea out there.
Okay, so I'm thinking something like, because to add to finding E, because applicant has previously removed portions of the front yard of the property to install drought-tolerant plantings and reduced irrigation, and because of the scale of the backyard and the clearing of 300 square feet for a 100 square foot footprint, we find that the water conservation applies only to the rear yard.
But we need to tie that in with, because it's an accessory building.
Right. Yes, and because it's an accessory building. So something like that to sort of hit those points.
Yeah, I've got the gist of it enough that I can
Okay.
write that finding now.
Okay.
Okay. So the finding is already there, and we need a motion to approve the project. There weren't any other conditions of approval that we were changing, right? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion? Want to give it a shot?
Sure. So I move to approve the application with the adjustments to the findings and the adjustments to the conditions of approval. Does that work?
To eliminate the requirement that the front yard be brought to the standards. of
Yes, to
emergency
eliminate
water.
the approval that the front yard be brought to the standards of water conservation.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And no one opposed? Okay. Finally, we've passed it. Thank you very much
Good luck.
for your patience. Okay. Moving on to the third application on our agenda, application 15-152. Let me first state that as a representative of Yountville Arts, I did attend several of the meetings where those, at the Vine Trail Arts, Culture, and Education Subcommission meeting, where the structure was presented, but I had no part in its design or approval. So just for public knowledge. Okay, Sandra?
All right. The item before you is design review for a new Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition trailhead rest structure. And it would replace the existing wooden trellis at the parcel on California Drive that's located between the southbound off-ramp for Highway 29 and the driveway that provides access to Domaine Chandon and the wine train. And that's that's almost an 18,000 square foot parcel that is owned by the town, and it's designated parks and playfields under the town's zoning ordinance. And it has a wooden trellis that serves really as a rest stop for people and sort of an informal stopping place for the Yountville trolley, since it doesn't really have a route. So the Vine Trail is proposing to build this a county-wide walking and biking trail, and it will eventually span from Vallejo to Calistoga, and it will be split into 10 different segments. You know that the Yountville Mile, which extends from Madison Street at the north end of town to California Drive, is one of the first segments constructed. Under construction now is the segment between California Drive and Redwood Road in Napa.
Yeah.
And that broke ground in August of 2015 and will be the next segment finished. And the Vine Trail would like to put one of these rest structures on this segment of the of the trail. There are an additional 2 or 3 structures that have either received approval from City of Napa or the other valley jurisdictions. And the Valley and Trail proposes to build each of these rest structures in the same design motif and with the same materials. And as you know from the application packet, it's a combination of both natural materials and the wood decking and the brown concrete and the sort of the rusted metal, along with modern design elements, and that's the frosted glass. They're also proposing a Y that's in the color of an orange that's the same on the Vine Trail logo. And the whole idea is to evoke this image of a grapevine for this structure. And it will serve as recognition really for this, for the whole trail and for each of the stops so that users know that they can stop at these sites. So I've discussed it in the staff report, and the town's aesthetic for right-of-way improvements is really a rural aesthetic that includes natural wood and rustic elements, and I've identified some of the improvements in town that are held to this standard. It's the wooden post street identification signs, it's the wood frame traffic signs, and really the wooden bus and pedestrian shelters. It feels more unique from other jurisdictions in that it uses these wood elements. If you look to other communities, they have standard metal signposts, and so it all comes together for this rural aesthetic, one that the residents have really said that they like. And recently, when the town was updating its street signs to conform to the reflectivity standards for signs, there was discussion of whether it should move to what is a more typical standard or more broadly used in other cities, and they didn't want to move in that direction. So we kept the elements that are really uniquely Yountville. So I'm raising that for you because this is a shelter that really falls into the same right-of-way improvement category, and so the discussion for you is whether the orange support post and the design itself is really consistent with this standard in your belief. If you find that it isn't, there may be slight modifications that can be made to the structure, and staff would say we're really generally supportive of it. We think it's very unique that they proposed this link to the vineyards and the vines, and so it's a really nice aesthetic for town. It's the orange really that is in the logo that we struggle with most of all, given the town's position on the natural elements and more rustic elements. Of course, the Vine Trail wants to use the proposed design without modification on all of the rest stops, and of course that makes sense because it's a way to brand the shelter and make sure that pedestrians and bicyclists see it. The orange is definitely one way of doing that. So we are raising those issues for your consideration, your discussion tonight, and ultimate decision. The Vine Trail is here to present their project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Does anybody have any questions of staff?
Nope.
No. Nobody? Okay, then we'll move on to the comments from the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Philip Sales. I'm the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Vine Trail Coalition. Thank you very much for seeing us this evening. Kim, nice to see you again.
Yes.
Our model, unfortunately, suffered a little bit of damage here, and so we have it available. We hope you might take a look at it. It's kind of an iconic design. Alexander Barrett is here this evening from 38 Spatial, and Tiana Filman, who's been working on the project. It started about 5 years ago when we decided that if we are going to build this 47-mile trail, we wanted to make sure that there was some sort of continuity elements, that when people went along the trail, they could see things that would immediately be something they'd identify with. And as Sandy said in her staff report, our plan eventually is to have 18 of these structures from Calistoga down to Vallejo. The colors that we've chosen are mostly muted The orange is actually on the model, and I think we're certainly open to muting it. The whole concept of this Y, it is a structural element of the structure, and thus, in some ways, we can't make it something else, because it actually all the structural engineering and so forth has already been based on this. The color itself, though, I mean, we're certainly open to, we haven't yet installed one of these, and if there's a color that works better, we're willing to look at it. But it is supposed to evoke the idea of the frame that holds up the trellising for the vines, and the green glazing on top sort of simulates in some ways the light sort of coming through the canopy below. So we've tried to do a lot of things that sort of, it's almost a work of art in a way. We're certainly eager to engage in any discussion on different colors. Originally the bike racks were going to be orange, but we have decided to go with a rusted brown color, exactly the same as you've got on the existing interpretive signs that are on the Vine Trail here in Yountville already. So we made that change based on some comments from staff. So thank you very much. If there's any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
In terms of the glass ceiling, how translucent or opaque is that going to be if you look up?
I'm going to ask Alexandra Tiana to.
Good evening, Alexander Barrett. I'm the principal at 38 Spatial. It's actually, the product's called 3Form, and it's pretty translucent. So it's stronger than a plexiglass and much stronger than a actual glass product. And it's a green product too. So it's kind of hard to tell through that because it has a back to it right now. It's placed on the back of a board, but it's, I wish it wasn't on there so you could actually experience it.
Yeah.
But yes, it's translucent.
So with that,
Enough so where you just see a figure,
Yeah.
you wouldn't see a shape. Yeah.
with that in terms of cleaning, the top of it, how often or how few, like, scarce is that going to be?
A good question. I don't think it would be more than annually because they're shaped and the water will run off of them. That product's been around for a long time and it is used in a lot of bus stops and
Yeah.
outdoor applications.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I would, along the standards of what a typical bus stop would be,
Yeah.
which would be probably infrequently.
So I hear from the gentleman that the orange color is subject to discussion. Is there any reason why the orange?
It's part of the brand marketing of the logo of the Vine Trail.
Okay, okay. I just feel, if that's what you want, is it really up for discussion, or is that what you prefer to have?
Of course, we would prefer it, but because it's an iconic, structure that goes all the way from Vallejo to Calistoga.
Right, right.
And they all kind of get built together, and it's a big process to powder coat these products all at once, so it would be somewhat of a custom job.
Yeah, when
don't
I
know
look
if
at that
I don't know if
board-
we would change them all or
Yeah.
just mute the one for Yountville. That would have to be a discussion.
Yeah, when I look at that board, that's the only color that
Yeah.
stands out.
You mentioned that the rack that you put in the back for the bike stands and for working on the bikes, you changed it from orange to rusty metal. Is that on all of them or
Yes.
just ours? All of them?
All of them, yes.
Okay. Okay, so just the Y uprights.
Pretty sure, correct? That was the decision, yeah.
So just the Y uprights are orange
Correct.
and the parts holding up the glass are,
Or a steel product
The
that's
steel
powder
product.
coated in black.
okay. And how did you decide how to orient it? That's
Well, they're
kind of
supposed to be
difficult.
oriented in the north-south direction, which does not work in this situation. So
Is
as
it-
close as possible. We did shading studies so that you're in shade from about 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Nice.
because the wood wall in the back is south facing.
The wood wall is south facing. Okay, and that's where the sign is that says Yountville
Correct.
Station or
Napa Valley
something.
Vine
Yeah.
Trail, Yountville.
So that will be visible when people are coming north on the path?
Correct. That will be facing towards the southeast, correct? Southeast. So it's almost south orientation, but shifted, I think, about 20 degrees from the true north-south.
Okay. You have any questions, Carrie? Carrie?
Thank you. What plans do you have for maintain, this kind of goes to what Member Tigrat was saying, what plans do you have for maintaining and rehabilitation, repair, and solid waste collection, those kinds of things?
That's a Philip question, so they've got it, yeah.
Okay. That's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. We are currently currently the Vine Trail's position is we are paying half of the cost per mile to each entity of direct costs for trail maintenance every year, based on a cost of $12,000 per mile per year. The shelters are very specific and this is just basically to cover the sweeping, the removal of glass, the weed whacking and so forth that you need to do along a trail. We have set up an endowment fund, a $500,000 endowment fund, that we're using the profits and interest from that to pay for this subsidy that we're basically giving the cities and counties and town for each mile of the trail per year. Because the shelters are very specific, we are going to enter into separate agreements with the city, the county, and the city of Napa. We will probably maintain those ourselves. We want to make sure they're maintained at a high quality, often because other things come up and staff can't get to things. We would like to make sure these things, they're kind of our flagship, so to speak. So we would be cleaning the glass every a year. I have solar panels on my house, so I know you have to get out there at least once a year and hose them down. We would be there getting any graffiti that gets onto the walls. We would clean those off. On the back of the walls, there's a map showing where you are on the Vine Trail, a sign that acknowledges donors. We also have around the as a band that runs around it, we have these footprints, which we're using as a fundraiser. We'll be selling these for people to sort of commemorate their time or their living here in Napa Valley. It's a program we're launching this year as a way to sort of augment our funds. We're about to write a check for almost $2 million from our coalition to fund the construction of the bike path from Yountville down to Napa. So, but we've been thinking about the trail maintenance. We did a white paper, which we presented to the NCTPA Technical Advisory Committee in December, and we actually had a maintenance summit with all 14 agencies that are going to be involved in the various stages of maintenance on this bike path over 47 miles. So we've been taking a very proactive view of it. Now, regarding waste disposal, your latter part is there are 2 existing trash containers out there already. We don't necessarily, we see that as more or less part of the normal maintenance that would be done, so it wouldn't be adding anything to the town for them to continue to maintain the trash removal on that. But that's the only thing that we would be relying on the town to do. And I have talked to Steve Rogers about putting together a separate agreement for the shelters that we would enter into. So I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you.
Can I ask you guys one more question? My standard question, do you guys have any objections to any of the proposed conditions of approval as presented?
I am a little bit of, I need to probably take a quick look at the conditions of approval. I'm sorry, I should have printed one out earlier.
I'll ask Sandra a question while you're reading that. Number 9, about submitting sign specifications. The design as presented shows a sign, so do they have to submit another approval for that, or is that included? It's not included in this application?
Well, it doesn't include the specifications as to size for each of them.
Oh, okay.
So we could analyze it in terms of the amount of frontage they get, and would simply like to work with them to make sure that.
So that still
consistent with
needs
the
to be
code.
done?
Yeah.
Okay. I think there was a picture that included a sign, but you're right, the specs are not in there. Okay.
We do have a question about number 8, which is submit a lighting plan because of nighttime lighting. We're not proposing to light these shelters at the moment. If this is something, I don't believe there's lighting out there at the existing shelter. Generally speaking, since most people won't be using the trail at night, it seems rather foolish. There's a downside to this. I worked for park and recreation departments for almost 40 years. If you put a light out somewhere in the middle of a playfield, people assume it's open. I've had police departments say don't put lighting out there because then people go out there and do drug deals because it's a place they can count money and all sorts of things. So I wouldn't necessarily think it would be a benefit to lighting it at night.
So you will not be submitting a lighting plan?
Correct.
Okay.
This was a condition imposed by the Department of Public Works. They want the light out there for safety purposes, for when the sheriff drives by, just a real low-level light to see if anyone is congregating underneath it.
There are no street lights in the area? Existing street lights?
Gee, I can't tell you
Because
exactly where it is.
the station is right, not station, but that guard gate, whatever it is right next door.
Mhm.
And that, I
Well,
assume,
the
has
wall
some out
faces that
exterior lighting.
direction, so it was simply for safety purposes. And I understand from the Department of Public Works that you can have a solar cell to provide this low level of lighting if there isn't an electrical feed out there. So
So is that part of our, do we need to define that? Do we need to tell them they need to provide lighting? Or is Public Works just suggesting it, or?
it's a recommended condition of approval from Public Works, and this is the design of the structure, so it's the time to consider that. This
Okay.
project agreement and the contract for the maintenance and the leasing of land and all of that will go before the town council, but to me, that's a very separate issue that's going before them for.
So they could either submit a lighting plan, or they could not submit a lighting plan and let it go to town council without a lighting plan?
Well, the town council will be looking at it in terms of design. So
Okay.
this is the time to lock in that requirement if you deem it important, based on the recommendation of the Department of Public Works.
Okay. Versus Philip's comments
Yeah.
about his experience.
Well, you have a shelter out there already that isn't lit, so
lit.
there's no change
Yeah.
in effect.
Okay.
Okay. One additional question. You held up the footprint. What I didn't see anything in the report on that. Could you explain that a bit more?
There is if you would care to look at the model, I'd bring it over, but I'm not sure it would survive the journey. You'll see there's a number of footprints in a band that goes around the non-use area, and they're actually in the set in the concrete, and so that's part of the fundraising recognition for donors who give money to the project. And this is the actual size. I think I dropped off
Yes.
the aluminum. I don't. Do they have that?
I can go get it. I don't have it here.
This is the actual size of the footprint. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Xander, do you know, is the Domaine Chandon sign that's right there, is it lit?
Yes. I believe it is.
It is, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's right there. So there's already some lighting. But the whole area is covered in trees, okay.
The basic, Sandra, the footprint is basically what we have already there. It's not making it bigger or smaller.
Actually, it is a modification. It's not as deep on the property as the footprint. Let me go to that page to see. You go on sheet A 102, the dash line shows the footprint of the existing structure. And this is more narrow but longer.
Okay.
That's the proposed one, and then the dashed
Right.
line is the existing one. Square footage is probably about the same. Okay, so we can proceed with our discussion.
Sorry, there's one other permit. It also talks about the landscaping, because we actually won't be removing very much in terms of landscaping, but the plan would be to augment the existing landscaping that's there. It's Hypericum, St. John's wort is the ground cover that's there. The condition it's in right now, and I have mentioned this to city staff, it looks like somebody may have been a little overzealous about turning off water to it. That plant is from the Middle East and can survive in drought conditions, so I think, we obviously think it's a good choice because it's a solid ground cover, screens out weeds, and will grow with minimal water. But that's our proposal for
Okay.
for the landscaping.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
First inkling is on the orange color. Obviously, I'm not really for the Y shape in this orange color on the board. I'd much rather see it possibly the color of the bike rack. I'm not opposed to keeping the kind of rust orange for in between the. Is that the bike rack or the bike? Repair station. The repair station. I think the rust orange is just kind of a highlight, isn't a bad touch to it. But I think if you start making the Y that solid orange, it's too much of a draws attention almost, which I know is part of what they're looking to do. But I think the orange in the actual Vine Trail sign is enough to give it that uniqueness and make it stand out in Yountville, because there's really not too much color going on in Yountville.
Okay. Barbara?
I guess I can kind of agree with Cal on that. It's a rural setting, and we want to blend, like a park or any public area, the less obvious to promote one thing, just because the color would stand out. It would disrupt the harmony, I think, for what we're trying to do in this town, sort of blends in naturally. That's my personal preference.
Okay. I think it's a beautifully well-designed structure. I think it would be a nice addition to the town, and I like the idea that they are branded and recognizable so that they are functional. People recognize what they are. I have no objection to the color because I think it does its job of matching with the logo and bringing attention to it. And yes, we're a rural town with a rural flavor, but being on the Arts Commission, we've added 30-something sculptures to town, some of them very bright red, some of them very bright orange. And I think it just adds a little spice to what's already here. So I don't think we've I don't think we would be crossing the line by allowing that to be orange. I think it functions with what we've already added to town at this point.
The orange. I'm fine with the orange. I think it's on brand, and I think it would almost be weird if it weren't the same branding, marketing perspective as all the other ones. I think it would almost be like Yountville has a rusty. Theirs looks a little old and rusted. They might want to update it. But no, I think it's where it's located. It's so inconspicuous. I mean, it's in a spot that rarely any of us are in. I didn't even know that was actually there, to be honest with you, and I drive by there all the time. So I'm not adverse to it at all. I think it should actually probably be the same. If it's going to be up and down 48 miles of the valley, it should be of the same treatment, I think.
Gary?
On the orange, I don't have an objection to the color orange. I'd like to see it be the more subdued, and I see a couple or three different oranges from the board to the model, but the more subdued. I do agree that it is geographically removed from other pieces of the town's aesthetic, so it could be seen as a standalone, and it could be seen as a piece of art, given the treatment of it. So I could go with the orange if it were somewhat muted, more muted than the safety cone. Somewhere between the safety cone and an umber color is what I have in mind.
Which orange is it that we're looking at now? That orange.
That orange.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm seeing something more muted
That's
than
the
that.
true orange? That's the true orange.
Because I think on the model it's less of the bright orange.
I think it sticks out a lot on that board too, because it looks
Well, in this picture, it's brown.
standalone
Yeah.
on the site, I don't think it'll be sticking out as much as everyone thinks. But
In the photograph that we were given of it transposed in place, it's included in our drawings here, also shows it kind of more muted. Oh, I only have a little tiny one.
Right.
This photo that we were given, it's even more muted than, it's
the
barely
color
orange.
chips are typical.
Yeah.
Because it just comes from a piece of white paper.
Yeah. Okay,
So it's this orange.
yes. But the
I-
bike rack part is no longer orange,
Correct.
just the Y,
It's that orange.
just that, yeah, just this Y column at each end. The Y at each end? Is there,
One Y.
so there's only one Y?
Yeah,
So only that one on the far side
yeah.
is
Literally
orange?
square
Okay.
inches of
So it's not-
total surface area versus the huge wall.
Not very much,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's holding up the
And the
structure of
bike
the roof.
service station.
Oh, he said
bike
the
workstation.
bike workstation is no longer orange.
It's
He
a
said,
He changed it.
Oh,
The rustic
okay.
orange.
They
I'm
changed
sorry.
it to
Sorry.
rustic. That's okay. So the only thing orange is that one Y at the far end,
And the logo.
And the logo.
and the logo, which,
Can they both be the same color, same rusted orange?
And that's what we're here for, yeah.
I mean, it's their logo.
The thing is, it's an iconic feature
Yeah,
throughout the valley.
they'll be using it
They all
throughout the
get
bike.
powder coated together and
Yeah, yeah.
That particular orange has to do with maintenance also because we're using a company that has a really good,
Can you come up to the
Sorry.
microphone? Sorry.
we're using a company that has a really good maintenance dual spray can. They have their own formula for paint where if it needs to be repaired or painted at all, they have the standard color that it should outlast the other paint that's originally powder coated onto it. So we have a small selection of paints, colors that we're allowed to use, and this is as close to the Vine Trail orange that it comes in. So that's part of the reason too. It's that chip.
So the metal Y gets powder coated, and then if needed, if there's damage, somebody comes back with a spray can and touches it up.
Yeah.
And so then you
In
would
the
want the
exact
paints
color.
to match. Okay. Then we also need to discuss the lighting, the lighting plan. Do we want to make sure, since Public Works for Yountville has recommended lighting,
Where is the nearest power you can pull from?
I can't tell you that. I don't know.
well, the Domaine Chandon sign is lit, which is
So we could
right
probably-
nearby.
And that's on the town's property, so.
The Domaine Chandon sign is?
Okay.
Okay, so there is power readily available. Okay.
Can you also use solar? Would that be sufficient?
Under a
power?
lot of trees, if you look at that picture.
Okay,
I'm not sure,
yeah.
without going out and looking. Okay. Does somebody want to craft a motion incorporating those ideas?
So what was the conclusion about the lighting? Sorry. No lighting. No lighting.
You kind of,
At the suggestion of Public Works, I wouldn't mind very small lighting. To your point, we don't want to emphasize this is open,
Right.
come hang out, but at the same time, if we can make it more convenient for, our sheriff to drive by and see that no one is in there, I don't see why it would be an issue.
I think
Yeah.
there's a reason why the Public Works recommended, so we need to consider that,
mhm.
yeah.
And so, may I ask one more question of the applicant?
Sure.
Before? You said the bike repair rack is going to be a rusted orange?
correct. Do we have a sample of that?
Rusted metal,
Yeah,
isn't it?
Rusted metal, not
Yeah.
a powder coated color,
correct.
but a rusted.
No, it's a powder coat, but it will be more on the rustic side. I wish we had a sample of it.
So a rustic orange, R-U-S-T-I-C.
Not rusted.
Yeah.
Okay. And that'll be more of a brown orange, kind of?
Yes? Okay.
Not
Can't
sure.
answer that question this time yet. 'Cause
No
I know
problem.
they do their own colors that we have chosen. Is that correct, Bill?
It's an orange, but I'm sorry, I don't have
But it's not any of the oranges we've seen here tonight.
Correct.
Okay, thank
But
you.
not as bright.
Thank you.
I don't want to kind of harp on this point, but I'd at least like to see a sample of what the orange we're installing would be. I don't know. I think this is it's a big enough feature that we're putting in Yountville that we want to make sure we get it right. Right?
Sure.
And if we haven't seen the proposed orange that's going to be on it tonight.
Well, we've seen the loudest of the oranges.
Very true. I would be okay with a muted version of some form of orange on that Y. But I think that in the brush and the trees with everything is going to stand out.
Isn't it supposed to stand out though?
So that it's noticed,
I
because
thought that
right
was the
now.
purpose,
yeah.
because people are riding their bikes, and if they want to rest, they need to know where they're going.
Because there's a air fill station and a workstation for working on your bike.
It's gonna be
and a
pretty.
bench to
I
take a
think it's
rest.
supposed to be standing up.
So they're trying to have it noticed. Think of the bright red sculpture in the middle of town.
Are you painting the non-Y, the workstation? Is that painted or is that a metal?
It's a metal that they're all powder coated because
Powder
they
coated.
last the longest.
Okay.
It's usually 10,
And
12
then-
years.
Then the Y, can that be applied in the same way as the workstation?
Two different companies and products. So
Got
the
it.
people who make the
Okay.
bike station and pump
Different-
have their own process.
Okay, I
And
get
back to what she was saying on the maintenance part, if you did a custom, I don't know if you're gonna be able to do a custom. So if we went down that road on a muted orange, we'd end up having to go to maybe just a beige. That the Cardinal, the company, makes the colors. You can't really change
Right,
their colors.
okay.
There's a select few.
Okay.
So it's back to that maintenance issue.
Okay.
So if we say no to the orange, then we get beige. Basically. So you don't
Well,
want beige or you want orange?
And I appreciate the maintenance part that you choose.
That makes sense.
When you choose a stock color, you can always get more of it for touch-up, making it easier to maintain it instead of going custom. I can appreciate that. So the way this works, if I craft a motion and you don't agree with it, then you don't have to vote yes.
Yep.
Okay. Then I would like to propose a motion that we accept this project as presented, with the conditions of approval, including that the applicant shall submit a lighting plan to offer some moderate lighting, in working with the Public Works Department as to what that lighting should be. Is that good enough? Anybody want a second it?
A second.
All those in favor? Only two. Okay, motion did not pass. So somebody else
I think
would like
it's
to
the
craft a
color.
motion.
I think it's the color. We like to see a more muted color. I think that's what I'm hearing here.
Obviously,
From a process standpoint, Sandra, is there any way to form a subcommittee and for us to invest it with the authority to select an orange that the applicant could bring to us? Or, I mean, because we'd like to, I think I speak for everybody, we'd like to take some action tonight, but obviously we're divided. Is there a way to do that?
well, even if we said a muted orange, that's not specific enough.
Right.
So they would have to come back.
That's what I'm saying. Can
Yeah,
they come
they're
to
gonna
a
come back.
subcommittee? Could we appoint two people to meet with them and say, yes, this orange?
Or does it have to come back?
We
Next month.
public speaker, and I
Sure.
made a motion.
Sure, come on.
If we gave you a second option right now, and it seemed all right, and we just called it out on the drawings tonight, that goes along with.
Yeah? You have
Fits
another
everyone.
We'd like
option?
to see it.
Judge, can I
You
come
came
up?
prepared?
This one.
Uh,
Which one's muted?
One in the center.
No.
More mustard.
And these are powder-coated colors. Yeah.
Oh. So which one is he doing?
He's talking about this one.
Oh, the
That's
yellow one?
not even orange, yeah.
That's yellow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's talking about. I think, right?
Did anybody like that color better?
No.
I like that color there on the back, the rack, the bicycle rack. Can we do that color? Is that muted enough for Carrie?
I believe that had to do with the
It's a different
maintenance of it,
manufacturer.
yeah,
Oh.
and the
It's two
custom job.
different-
How much? I guess question to you all: how long would this set you back if we didn't make an action tonight? How far along are you in the process to have this kind of up and running?
The thing is, what you see there, or what we've presented, has already been approved by Napa County and Napa City, and we've already got construction documents pretty much approved to move forward in Napa City. So kind of back to that issue, I know it's a design. Now we have all these iconic structures, and then you come to Calistoga, and you've got, I guess you could have one with a different Y, but
Yellow.
yellow, or muted, whatever, but it'd be different.
And then there wouldn't be the maintenance package that you have with the spray paint.
Yeah, it's a
Would, everybody else's would
cost
be
and
orange, and
efficiency
you
because
wouldn't
they're
have
all
any for
powder
Yountville.
coated. It's kind of a kit of parts, because we'll make extras parts to all
Right,
these.
and they'll all be
Something's
orange.
damaged, yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of this one?
Is that different?
It's gonna make her trail.
This is,
Is that different?
It is.
should not, just
Okay.
pulled it.
What do you think?
There's a little bit darker orange on there instead of yellow. It's on the other side. But it still is opening up the maintenance issue that when
Yeah.
the truck comes by to maintain the facility, he has the orange paint that's the standard for all the other stations. He doesn't have the orange paint that's just on Yountville Station.
How much is it going to wear? What's the patina? It just stays that color forever?
Pretty
Does it
much.
get brighter?
It's
Does
a
it get?
powder coat.
Yeah,
So
so it
if
stays.
anything, it stays. If anything is when you spray it, it's if someone hits it or knocks it off, pretty much.
Somebody changed
maintenance
their
free.
bicycle up to it or something.
Yeah.
And so if we were to go with the other orange, the international orange, is it too late for you to make that change with the county?
Which one are you thinking that?
They've
for?
already approved it.
The ones on the left.
No. But then everything would change. But it's doable.
What do you mean everything changes?
All the stations would.
They
All
have
the
to go
stations
back.
would have to
Oh,
change.
all the
Approval
stations
from
would have to
everybody.
change?
Yeah, that doesn't make
It's,
sense.
otherwise, it's not very efficient.
It's something we could do if we get some direction tonight. We're submitting our construction
Jeez.
drawings to
It'd
the
be
city
need-
building department tomorrow morning. But Napa, because we're building 2 shelters there. So if it's something that we can agree on tonight, we'd be happy to.
Slightly less orange.
Yeah, we could change that color if we could get approval tonight, and that way we can submit in the new drawings.
And that can be also maintained easily as well?
Correct.
Okay.
You do them all
Then
that
let's just do
color.
that one.
Okay. What do you,
I was going to say, if it's that much work for them, to me, they're close enough where I would be fine with the
The other one?
one.
Yeah.
I don't think it's worth going through all that trouble for
They're
the
so
applicants.
slight.
Yeah.
But that slight is enough to just,
Given the limited choices of
Yeah.
color, now that we understand that, that makes
yeah,
a
it's not like a
difference.
whole palette of, you know.
Right. Thank you for showing us. That was
Yeah, thank
helpful
you
to
for
see
patience.
our universe.
Um,
you want me to
someone would like
propose it
make
again?
a motion.
Okay, I'd like to propose a motion to accept the application number 15-452 and the proposed conditions of approval, including number 8, that the applicant shall submit a lighting plan and work with the Department of Public Works for some minor lighting that's appropriate, that we would approve it as presented. In a second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, motion passed. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
It's very pretty.
It is nice, very nice.
I know. I mean, they could put them
They're
anywhere.
both really
It's nice
orange.
that
I
they're
mean, it's
putting
not
it
like
here.
you can.
Yeah. Okay.
And the lighting's a good idea, I think.
Yeah, I do too. It's all hidden in the trees. Okay, any presentation or discussion?
No, no item.
You can leave it here till tomorrow if you'd like.
Let them do their thing. And we'll move on.
How many are they expecting to go through the
38
trail?
all the way.
Now, how many riders?
Oh, I don't know.
Bikers?
I don't know.
Cyclists?
I don't know.
I don't know. We were doing arts and culture, the meetings I went to. Okay, staff and board reports.
We have the election of the chair and the vice chair on tonight's agenda. So we would look to the board itself to nominate a member to be chair and nominate another member to be the vice chair. I'd say we do them in two separate motions. I'll turn it over to you to make a selection.
Volunteers?
I make a motion that Kim Cook is our chair.
I'll second that.
Can I make a motion before that gets voted on?
Yes.
That Carrie Dorman be made our chair?
She doesn't want to be
I think her legal background is an
That will work.
amazing asset.
I second that.
And what about you as the assistant chair, second chair,
Vice chair?
vice chair?
Really, I'm so new. I think that, really, Kim, I think your experience is invaluable as the chair. I would be happy if you want me to serve as a vice chair.
That's good.
Okay.
You good with that?
I second that.
Okay.
Can we do that all in one
Sure.
motion?
Chair, vice chair.
Staff has lost control of the meeting.
Completely.
This is what you get.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else?
No.
Okay.
We adjourn.
All right. I'll
second.
that.
I'll second that.
Ooh, that was a long one. That was one of our longer ones.
That was a lot then.
But while we're still on camera, just so you know, till the light goes out. There we go. Okay.
Very much.
I like that.